Hello, hello. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, just put your finger on your nose, just the way I test. That's it. You can't hear me. All right. Thanks for being here. Let's kick this off with a question, which is, how many of you are in L&D? Good. You're at the right event. How many of you think you're delivering results that the business cares about? How many people hope? You're working in hope. That's great. Look, all right. By the end of this, we're going to say why we need to be doing what the business cares about. And if you're not doing it now, hopefully by the end of this session, you find a practical way of how you can be doing things that the business cares about. Before that, let me tell you, once this decides to, a bit about myself. I'm Nelson, one of the co-founders and CEO at How Now. We're an AI learning company. You can find out more about us near the networking lounge over there, where we'll be hosting happy hour in about 20 minutes. So head over there and come and say hello. I'm also the author of a book called Learning at Speed. Anyone read it? Anyone read it? All right, got a few people who have read it. Great. It's basically a practical guide that brings together mental models and frameworks for how, as an organization, you can accelerate the speed at which you learn. And I'm also the host of L&D Disrupt. Any listeners of L&D Disrupt? If not, you've just found the thing you're going to listen to on your way back home. We bring incredible thinkers. We pick their brain around some of the biggest challenges facing the world of work and L&D. And so it's a good listen. Now that's enough about me. Let's get to what's going on in the world. That's where we need to first start. Who thinks it's a hard time to be in L&D? Yeah, few people. Oh, you guys are humble. Yeah, it's a hard time to be in L&D. Let me tell you why. There is a talent crunch happening in the world. It's basically, in a nutshell, it's harder to find talent, it's harder to keep talent, it's harder to replace talent. But actually, if you look under the hood, the talent crunch is actually not a talent crunch. It's not literally a shortage of people. Actually, the problem is we have a skills gap problem. The problem isn't a lack of humans. The problem is a lack of humans with the right skills. And actually, if we look under the hood and you see the data, it's quite clear. So we've got a bit of a hiring drought. Now, as much as you might be reading about unemployment rates going up, what you'll also see in the data is the demand for certain skills is far higher than the supply for those specific skills. 74% of employees have said that they're struggling to find specific talent. Now, there was a crazy number that I saw, which was 70% of technical workers had multiple job offers at the time when they accepted a job. Now, what that tells you is whatever you're reading about unemployment going up, there are certain people with certain skills who are sitting there with multiple job offers and have got choice. Now, you combine that with a retention problem. Companies, many companies, are terrible at keeping their people because they're not investing in the reasons that keep those people. And so where you've got 94% of employees saying they would stay longer if people invested in their learning and career growth, what you have is a situation where organizations are not doing that enough or in the most effective way. Now, you combine this data with the data I showed you before, what that means is me as someone who's working in a company, I don't feel like my retention and growth is being supported by the company, and I've got tons of opportunity for my skills out in the job market. You combine those two things together, you have a perfect storm, where the person can leave and walk until they find the right opportunity, because for their skills, there's a lot of opportunity out there. Now, you combine that with the cost of replacing that person. Now, this, about 12 months ago, used to be 1.5x for replacing someone. And that's purely just looking at the person's salary and the cost to be able to replace that person. So that's the recruitment costs, the missed opportunity, and then hiring that person in. What this doesn't take into account is what I like to call the leaky bucket problem. The leaky bucket problem is when you've been in a company for a few years, there's a lot of good stuff that's in your head. And most companies are terrible at capturing that good stuff that's in your head. And what happens to that when someone leaves? That good stuff leaves with them. And so you have a leaky bucket. No company today could afford to learn the things they once knew. We haven't even got enough time to be able to learn the new things that we need to be able to learn. And so this is a constant battle companies are struggling with. Now, you bring all of this together, and what you have is the reality that L&D are under more pressure than ever before. Now, what does this pressure look like? You've got CEOs who've got FOMO, right? There's a lot happening, it's very competitive, and so they don't want to be left behind. They don't want their organization to fall behind. So they want to make sure they've got the skills to get the work done. So they're turning around to the people in L&D teams and going, what are we doing? Have we got the skills to do it or not? And they've got very low tolerance for any investment that's not going to drive that desired impact. And so if you're asking for budget, they're asking for ROI. It's no longer an option. Now, if you've got CEOs who've got FOMO, you've got the workforce who've got FOBO, real thing, the fear of becoming obsolete. And so what's incredible about this is it's not just people who've been in the workforce for a very long time who've got this fear of becoming obsolete. People are entering the workforce worried that the skills that they've got are not going to be relevant for that long. And so what that means is they've also got a low tolerance for learning for the sake of learning. So if as an L&D team, I go and say, you've got to do this training, what you're going to get back now is going, why? How is this going to help me do my job? I'm too busy for this. How are you going to help me grow in my career? And so the days of learning for the sake of learning are gone. And then you've got these people in the corner who are crying for help. And that's your people managers. Data shows that it's the hardest time to be a people manager is right now because we've got the most demanding workforce in place. Who's a manager here who can relate to that? It's all right, your direct reports are not here. Put your hand up, right? Because they've got the most demanding workforce who are going to them going, I need you to help me do my job better and help me progress my career. But managers haven't been equipped to be able to do that. They don't have the insights. They don't know what capabilities they have and don't have in a very constructive way. They don't know how they can help them build that capability because they don't know what learning is there or not. And so they're not well equipped in order to be able to provide that support. So what happens? They all turn to L&D. And who does L&D turn to? ChatGPT. They go to ChatGPT and they go, what the hell do I do? They're all asking me for something. But here's the problem. The problem isn't what you're doing. The problem is what you're not doing. So let's look at this pyramid. So what you have here is you got 80% of CEOs who are saying they want L&D ROI, which is unsurprising. But what's also probably not that surprising is most of them are not getting it. And why are they not getting it? That's because most organizations, learning is quite disconnected from what the business is trying to do. So if you look at this top of the pyramid is what every business does, right? Every business has a mission, every business has a strategy on how it's going to achieve that mission, and every business has some form of objectives or OKRs to measure whether you're on track to achieving that mission or not. And then you have a disconnect, and then you've got the learning initiative. Now let me tell you what's happening in the L&D bit over here. Anyone played bingo before? Right. So what L&D are doing here in quite so many organizations is playing bingo. Right? I call out a number. That's when I put out a training program or course. Then someone has got a matching number. That person is winning. But the reality is most people haven't got the matching number. And every time they don't, you're playing L&D bingo and losing, which means we're now wasting time, money, and resources. And you get this disconnected gap in the middle. Now, what does that look like? That looks like employees who are overwhelmed with irrelevant learning, frustrated that they're not supported. It often looks like this, where you think you've been doing a lot in L&D, putting a lot of budget in, doing a lot of work, and then you read the engagement survey come out and it says, not enough learning and development. And you're like, what the hell? I've just doubled how much we spend in this. You read the exit interview and they're saying the same thing. That's because that alignment is not there. Now, how can we solve for this? For us, this is where the missing piece here is there's a missing layer that connects the dots between what's happening here in L&D and what's happening here at the top of the business. And that's skills. And the reason why it's skills is a shared language that everyone in the business understands. I can go up to a CEO and say, we don't have the skills to achieve these objectives. They would understand. But if I told them people are doing less than 40 hours of learning, so we're not going to achieve this OKR, they don't care. I can go to someone in the workforce and say, you don't have the skills to progress in your career, and they'll understand that. But if I told them you've not done 40 hours of learning, therefore you're not going to progress in your career, they don't get that. What skills helps us do is explain the context of why we're learning what we're learning and the difference we're trying to make or the impact we're trying to make. Now, this is something we're already seeing happening. This move towards skills-first approach is already happening. And I just want to call out here, this is not a skills transformation with skills with a capital S. Right? This is not your big, let's become a skills-based organization overnight and change everything. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about skills with a little s. Skills with a little s is about understanding what skills someone needs to be able to do this task and how am I going to help them get that skill. And I'm going to show you how we can bring that into play. But here are a few organizations who are doing it. Right? You've got Blackstone, one of the biggest financial companies in the world, who shifted towards a more skills-first approach to their career pathways. Amongst the many benefits they found they were able to build a far more diverse and inclusive workforce, not because they were trying to tick a box, because it was better for business. And when it's better for business, you'll find people stick with it for far longer than when they're trying to virtue signal. And so they found the benefits of building a very diverse and inclusive workforce. McDonald's, they have a program called the Archways to Opportunity, now which is all about getting their own homegrown talent, looking out for the skills that they need to see. So actually, McDonald's have over-indexed on the number of managers who are homegrown talent because they're looking for the skills that need to be developed rather than hiring for a certain qualification that you have out on the market. Let's go back. Then we work with the UK government. So this is the entire UK civil service who have a single front door to their skill development called the Government Skills Campus. Again, what this is about is mapping everyone in the civil service to the skills they need and then helping them develop those skills and giving them the mobility they need to take that skill anywhere in the civil service. Don't we all want a highly skilled civil service? Well, that's what this is about. You don't want a civil service who are clocking up 100 hours of learning, do you? Wouldn't you rather they had the skills to get the job done? Well, that's what this does. Another organization, TomTom, a great one to look at. TomTom practice the philosophy of real-time HR, which is how do you deliver the employee experience people need right now, right then. And they're extending that to apply to L&D. And the way they're doing that is by taking a more skills-based approach, where they're connecting the dots between learning and business with what they're doing through skills. Does this translate into meaningful metrics? Yeah. Here's another organization we work with called Operatics, who are able to meaningfully increase the time to get new people to productivity, taking a skills-based approach, because they're able to focus on what skills do I need this person to have to be able to be productive. They don't need to know everything and anything and every policy that exists. They just need to have skills X, Y, Z, and they were able to ramp people up 33% faster. So what's the playbook? Now, this is more than anything, it's a change in the way we think about L&D. So let's go through those steps. Let's go back to my pyramid. Now, this starts with something that typically I see L&D teams doing after the fact. And that's where we've done the program, we've put the learning out there, and then we're trying to retrofit what metric it moved, what impact did it have. Instead, we have this conversation up front. So we go to the pyramid and we go, okay, we've got a bunch of OKRs and objectives. Let's speak to the leadership team to understand which of these OKRs matter. Right? What are the OKRs that really matter to us? And then what you're doing at that point is you're securing leadership buy-in, because we're aligned. This is the objective you want to get to, and this is the objective I'm going to help you get to. Now, once we've aligned on that, we get to the next stage. Now we look at the OKR, and let's say the OKR is we want to increase customer retention rates by 15%. Then what we do is we look at what are the job roles that are influencing this particular OKR. Now that we know those job roles, we now need to break it down to go, okay, what are the skills that job role needs to have? So let's say for increasing customer retention, the roles that are going to influence this are customer success, customer support, and an account manager. I look at those roles and I break it down to go, okay, what are the skills they need to have to be able to do the tasks they need to? And then I need to figure out, do they have those skills or not? And in doing that exercise, I land with what are the skills they don't have. Let's say in this particular example, we're lacking in problem solving and empathy as a particular skill that we need to work on. Now what we do is, we know these are skills we need to work on. Now we look at our learning ecosystem and go, what's the learning that's going to help us build this skill? And let's pause here. I want you all to reflect on the last bit of learning that you did that had a big impact on your performance or your career. Take a moment to think about it. Now I want you to put your hand up if it took place inside an LMS. That's quite ironic, because I'm pretty sure many of you have either bought an LMS, forced someone to use an LMS, yet the big moments of learning that you do didn't come from an e-learning course that sits there. Whereas if I said a book, a mentor, from a peer, a webinar, coming to an event, there's so many different ways. And what you need is you need to bring that ecosystem together and map it to skills. Whether that's a coaching conversation or that's a blog or a podcast or a webinar, the importance here isn't whether it's a course. The importance here is how aligned is it to the skill that I need to build. So this is where I go. I've got a workshop on active listening. I've built a toolkit on conflict resolution that's tied to those skills. Now we connect the dots. Now this is where I'm tracking this. I don't start by, these are leading signals. Are people finding my learning resource? Are people engaging with the learning resource? These are leading indicators of engagement, but they don't tell you whether you're having a meaningful impact on the results that your business cares about. What your business cares about is this. And being able to connect the dots helps you now talk about results the business cares about. Because you can now say, well, look, we've built this skill, which has contributed to increasing the customer retention, or at least moving in the right direction. And I spoke to these people, I spoke to the customer success manager, I spoke to the customer support person, and I asked them, how come you're retaining more customers? What changed? And they said, well, I started doing this thing. You know, why did you start doing that thing? Well, I've been getting coached by so-and-so, and that so-and-so kept saying I should do this thing. That connects the dots back. No one's expecting L&D to be the solo hero. What people are asking you to do is to be able to connect the dots, to be able to tell that impact story of what you invested in, what you did, how did it help me build the skills I needed to be able to achieve those objectives. Sounds pretty straightforward. Sounds like we can prove ROI because we're talking about the things the business cares about. But here's where the problem is. When we share this playbook and we talk to organizations, they go, well, how can I do that? Like, the only learning I've got in my system is e-learning. So I can't do what you're telling me about bringing this scattered learning together. I can't connect it to skills because our skills live in a spreadsheet and no one uses that spreadsheet. And it hasn't been updated for the last 2 years, so we don't even know if those skills are relevant anymore. And then the only way we know what people need is for a training needs analysis that we do like once a year. By the time we find out that problem existed, it's been in the business for 12 months, so it's already hurt us. And then right now, with the current system I've got, it takes us about 2 weeks just to find out how many hours people have been learning. And I couldn't even tell you whether that was role-specific learning aligned to the skills or not. I hear the pain. When you've got this many problems, yeah, like me telling you to connect the dots is not going to fly. And so this is really what underpins the approach that we take at How Now is, okay, let me, as a technology provider, I shouldn't be telling you this, but let me tell you, technology is not going to solve your problem on its own. And that's why we spend as much time talking about the strategic playbook as the technology. They both need to come together. If you're going to change your strategic playbook, you're going to have gaps in how you can operationalize that. And how you fill those gaps is with the right technology. So what I'm going to tell you now is how organizations are doing this. So the 4 things you want to do to combat these issues is you want to bring together all of that relevant learning. You want to connect it to the right role-specific skills. You want to merge it into how people are working. And then you want to measure whether that learning is driving the right skills and driving the growth you want to see. Now let me show you what this looks like in practice. So what you're looking at here is what our front door of How Now looks like. Now what we first do is we integrate and curate all of the learning that's available to an individual in your organization. Now that could be third-party libraries, that could be things that are living in your SharePoint and your OneDrive, this could be content from across the web, this could be content that you're creating yourself. Now we bring all of this together, great. But that's not good enough. Because the problem is all of these different content speak completely different skills language. Content from YouTube is tagged differently, a podcast is tagged differently, another third-party library, they're all speaking completely different skills language. So what we also do is we map your entire ecosystem to a universal skills language, which is universal for your company. So whether that's content from provider A or video from YouTube or your own content, it's all speaking the same skills language. It's not just mapped to skill, it's also mapped to proficiency level. That's the key thing. There's no good telling me this blog is good for leadership. Is it good for an entry-level leader? Is it good for a more seasoned leader? You get to that level of granularity where it's mapped using AI. Now, once you've brought this ecosystem together and it's talking your universal skills language, now how do we connect this right learning to the right people? Now, this is where, to decide who the right person is, we need to know what skills they have and what skills they need. Now, this is where what we have is a skills ontology. Now, all that means is we use labor market data for every job role. We break that job role down into tasks. Because it's not your job that needs skills, it's your tasks that need skills. And so we break that job role down to tasks, and then we use AI to infer what are the skill and level you need to be able to do that particular task. So now what we can tell you for every person in your organization, we integrate with your HR system, and through that integration, we can now tell you what skill and level each person in your organization needs to have. Then we take a 360 skill review approach. Now, this is where we combine self-review, peer review, and manager review to tell you what level of proficiency they're at. We use a 5-level proficiency model called the Dreyfus Skill Acquisition Model. Now, why take this approach? I could just give you a test. Because we all know, just because you ace the test, it doesn't make you great at your job. This is a more evidence-based approach because I'm basing my review based on what I've seen you apply that skill in the workplace. So now I know what skill you need to have. I know what skill you actually have. I've also brought your learning together. Now it's for us to give you that learning at the right time. The right time is critical because going back to my L&D bingo, quite often the reason why we don't have the matching number, I might have that need in 6 months' time. But you're asking me to do this course now when it's not meaningful to me. So how do you connect at the right time? Well, first, you've got to take away the friction to be able to do that. So this is where we use AI to be able to curate and create a blended targeted skill development pathway in seconds. Now, what this is doing is it's doing the work of what an instructional designer or a learning experience designer would do to be able to look at your learning ecosystem, see the right learning resources for a particular skill, and then to build in the best practices like dynamic scaffolding to be able to create a pathway that would take someone from a skill level 2 in negotiation all the way to skill level 4. And this could be tailored down to every individual. What's really impressive about this is we have managers creating these pathways, not L&D. A manager could have a conversation, identify those gaps, and then they can go create a tailored development pathway for that particular individual. But the problem we have is most of what is available today is knowledge-based learning. It's all about what you know, not what you can do. And so quite a lot of the learning we don't offer is skills-based learning. So we can't expect people to develop skills when we're not giving them skills-based learning. You know, how often do you spend as much time on how people apply learning versus have they consumed the learning or not? We're just interested in whether they've seen it and they've engaged. But actually what the business cares about is whether they can apply it. And this is where we're using AI to essentially create an AI tutor or coach who's built on your organization's context, who's built on your organization's knowledge, and is able to bring that to life, is able to ask you reflective questions, is able to create real-world scenarios for you to practice in. It's able to give you instant feedback. Let me show you that. It's able to give you instant feedback. Now, this is one of the things, quite often to get relevant, meaningful, contextually relevant feedback, I'm having to wait days or weeks to find my manager and to get that feedback. What you're able to do here is feed in knowledge from your organization to be able to coach, help people practice and give them instant feedback. Now, how do people make sure people access this? Well, it's not about having a portal. It's about giving them access to it everywhere they work. And that's why with the How Now platform, you'll be able to integrate that directly into the apps and tools where people work. If your digital HQ is Microsoft Teams or Slack, then you'll be able to embed it directly within there so people can find exactly what they need directly in those tools. Now, none of this matters if you can't prove the results the business cares about. But right now, you might actually be delivering on the results business cares about, but quite often the problem is you can't access the data to be able to prove that. Now, the few things you need there is right now you're probably having to go to multiple platforms to run reports. The first thing we do is centralize all of that into a one-stop shop for all of your reporting. But that's still not good enough, because you don't want to be running Excel spreadsheets to be able to find out whether you had impact or not. Well, this is where you have an AI analyst, where you just ask the question. Right? You ask the question of not just have they completed the training, when did they complete it, how many hours, but you can ask questions. What are the biggest skills gaps that my people in my team have got? You can ask the questions around, are people working on the skills that they need to develop? You can ask those difficult questions that are very hard to answer if you didn't have an analyst to be able to do that. So look, what does that do? It's a paradigm shift in the way we think about learning, where I'm sure you're all familiar with this idea of Netflix for learning. But that's not what people are screaming for. People are not asking you for more content. That's not what the business results, that's not what the business cares about. What I'd rather have is to give everyone a personal trainer for their skills, where they're building the skills that we need them to have so the business gets the results they care about. And that's where, by embracing AI, to not create more content faster, but to be able to connect those dots, we can start to deliver the results the business cares about. Now, if you'd like to see this in action, you can come and find us right at the networking lounge at C120. If you just want to have a chat, we're hosting a happy hour right now at the networking lounge, so pop over for a drink. I'm more than happy to talk about it. Thank you for your time.